All right. Thank you all for joining the Gwinnett NAACP Martin Luther King Jr. Sunday Supper. We have a great line of guests lined up to speak and come on and give us an update on the beloved community. Yeah, different topics will be discussed on health, education, where we are just as a people overall in the community. So right now, not to delay the program any further, I'm going to turn it over to our second vice president, Hope Dennis, to open us up with a prayer, and then she will be turning it over to our moderator, which will be Ms. Nye Henry, who will introduce our first guest.
Thank you all for joining us this afternoon. If you're comfortable, please join us for a time of prayer. Father, thank you for this opportunity. In the midst of a winter storm and a winter blizzard, Lord, we thank you that we can come together to celebrate the legacy, the vision, and the work of Dr. King and so many others like him that worked hard to break generational curses and start a new covenant of life, peace, and community for Black people, for African Americans here in America, and for every person of color, Lord. So as you continue to give us a dream and a vision to move forward to making heaven look a little bit more like, make earth look a little bit more like heaven, Father, we want this time to be a time where we're on one accord, Father, where we learn, where we organize, we strategize, and we become educated. We thank you for the leadership of the NAACP, for this chapter, the leadership of President Poole and Vice President Edward and the rest of the EC, Lord. And we thank you for the community, the family in Gwinnett County, and the work and the leaders, the civil rights leaders that are being birthed in this generation within Gwinnett. We thank you for that, and we thank you for this time. And may we stay warm and healthy in the midst of this pandemic. And may this be one of the best annual Sunday Suppers that we have had yet. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
Good afternoon, everyone. Our first guest today is Dr. Kamar Phyllis Jones. Dr. Jones is a family physician, epidemiologist, and past president of the American Public Health Association, whose work focuses on naming, measuring, and addressing the impacts of racism on the health and well-being of our nation and the world. Dr. Jones is currently the 2021-2022 UCSF Presidential Chair at the University of California, San Francisco. She recently completed her role as a 2021 Presidential Visiting Fellow at the Yale School of Medicine and as the 2019 and 2020 Evelyn Green Davis Fellow at the Radcliffe Institute for Advanced Study at Harvard University. Dr. Jones taught 6 years as an assistant professor at the Harvard School of Public Health from 1994 to 2000, served 14 years as a medical officer at the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention from 2000 to 2014, and continues as adjunct professor at the Rollins School of Public Health at Emory University, and as a senior fellow and adjunct associate professor at the Morehouse School of Medicine. Dr. Jones' allegories on race and racism illuminates topics that are otherwise difficult for many Americans to understand or discuss. Recognizing that racism saps the strength of the whole society through the waste of human resources, she aims to mobilize and engage all Americans in a sustained national campaign against racism. I introduce to you Dr. Kamar Phyllis Jones.
Thank you. Thank you, Nye.
You're welcome.
And so I don't know if you wanted to just hear a few things from me, or you wanted to pitch some questions at me right now. I know that the viewers can also ask me questions. My apologies that I'm going to have to move to another meeting at 4:30 this afternoon. So I don't know what the best course of action is.
I think the best thing we need to do is probably jump right into some of the questions, because I think we did have some really good questions to ask. Since you got a limited time, we'll go ahead and jump right in.
Good. Sounds really good.
I'll let Nag take over. You want to go ahead and
All righty. So we do have we have a couple of questions, Dr. Jones. And the first question is, what is the health, wellness, and mental status of the Black community now that we are approaching year 3 of the COVID-19 pandemic? Historically, why does the socioeconomic status of Black people not a factor in determining their ability to health wellness?
So that question has a bunch of different parts in it. First of all, Black folks, we're trying to hold on, right? But we have been more likely to get infected with the virus, more likely to die from the virus, less likely to be able to access the vaccine, more likely to be in jobs where the workplace wasn't protecting us. I mean, even think about this new Supreme Court rule that lifted the stay on the on whether or not workplaces that were hiring more than 100 people could require vaccination. Now, I know everybody in the Black community, unfortunately, I would say, is not all in about getting vaccinated. So let me just stop there for a minute and then come back to some other parts of the question. What we need to do, family, is take care of ourselves, take care of each other, and recognize that until the world has this thing in control, then we're not safe. So let's go the 3 steps. Taking care of ourselves. You need to make yourself, you have to increase your protection, your armor. You don't want to be vulnerable. And what we know is that these vaccines that we have, especially the Moderna vaccine and the Pfizer vaccine, which are both called mRNA vaccines, are potent protection. Potent protection. So I know some people still, I mean, I was just on the phone with one of my good friends in another city who was saying that her nephew and his wife, and now their 5 kids, all have COVID, and they're trying to figure out who can take care of the baby who's 3 months old with COVID, right? Can the grandparents take the baby? No, because, I mean, well, maybe they're going to have to, but you see what I'm saying? Because then they might get COVID. We need to, and none of them vaccinated, right? None of them vaccinated. So I know everybody has their own reason for what they're doing. This is what I'm going to tell you as a physician and as a person deeply concerned about the health and well-being of Black people. We all need to get our vaccine, which for the Pfizer is get a shot, 3 weeks later, get the second shot, and then 5 months after that second shot, get your booster. So wherever you are, Moderna, get the shot, 4 weeks later, get the second shot, 5 months after that, get your booster. If you had the J&J and it's been more than 2 months, go get a booster, probably get a Moderna or Pfizer booster. And that's what we need to do. And I know people are like, oh, well, nobody can make me and whatever. These vaccines give you much more protection. People say, well, let me just get it. They say the Omicron is not so bad, so let me just get it. First of all, even though we still don't know if it's so bad or not, I've seen a lot of what's looking like it's going to be long COVID with the Omicron. But as it spreads, lots of people are getting sick because it's more infectious than measles, right? Which was the most infectious virus that we had known of in modern times. It's more infectious than measles. Some people who get it are going to get very sick from it. The hospitals are filling up to bursting. And what that means is not only are you going to have more people with COVID in the hospitals, but if they fill up the beds, then if I have an accident, if I slip out on this ice today, or am in some kind of car accident, or you know, have something else going on, there may not be a bed for me. And people have already been affected and died because there weren't beds available for them in other parts of the country. So all I'm saying is the first part to protect yourself is to get the vaccine. If you got the vaccine series, get boosted. It doesn't mean you're not going to get it, COVID, but it means you're not going to go to the hospital with it and you're not going to die from it. That's what it means. And you're probably not going to get the long COVID. What is long COVID? Long COVID is when you feel like you got over, the COVID symptoms, sore throat, congestion, maybe a cough, although this Omicron is not settling in the chest as much as some of the others, but cough, fever, achiness, all of this. And then 3 weeks later, you still can't think straight. Your thinking is fuzzy, or you're still really tired. You can't go out for a walk. You can't take care of the kids, can't make dinner, whatever it is that you're trying to do. Can't think straight for work. The other thing is about the kids. We need to protect those who either still can't, so now if you are 5 on up, you can get the vaccine, the second one, and the booster. And so everybody 5 and up, and we're lagging, especially Black kids are lagging in that. So if you have a child who hasn't started their vaccination thing, I really encourage you to do that. These are very safe vaccines. and much safer than COVID. People, I know one thing I was going to say, and then I'm going to let you come back in now with a question because I'm just going all over. But some people say, well, let me just get it. If you just get it, first of all, maybe you'll be lucky and maybe you won't get really, really, really sick with it. And maybe you won't. So maybe you won't be in the hospital. Maybe you won't die from it. Maybe you won't even get long COVID from it, but you might transmit it to somebody else. And you might transmit it to somebody, even somebody older who got their vaccines and their booster, but their immune system, because they're older, is not as strong. Or you might transmit it to one of our young people, somebody who is not quite old enough to get a shot. And that's what happened in this family with 5 kids, right? And now all of them sick, mother very, very sick, right? But what are we going to do with our families like that? So that's it. So you have to protect yourself. The other thing you need to do, if you're all boosted and everything, you still need to wear a mask. You don't need to wear your nice, cute little mask anymore. You need to get a KF94 or a KN95 or an N95 mask. And right now I got all of mine on Amazon, but you need to, so, that's one place where you can get them. Then if you have been exposed to somebody who says, oh, it's just a cold, right? You need to test yourself, like I would say a day after the exposure and then another day too. Starting on this Wednesday, if you go to, I had the name of it. I think it's covidtest.gov. You can request 4 free tests from the government starting this Wednesday. Go to covidtest.gov and you can request 4 tests. They won't come exactly that next day. It's not like 2-day delivery with Amazon, but they're going to start shipping them out at least within the week. Okay. So you should test. And then everywhere you go, even, like especially anytime you're inside and with the kids in school or in the workplace, you need to wear your mask. You still need to keep your distance, all those basic public health things that we know about. And then, so that was protect yourself, protect others with all those other public health measures. And then we need to be advocating that the United States government and all the governments of the world do more to make sure that the people in Haiti can get their first shot, or the people in Ethiopia can get their first shot, or Nigeria. We need to make sure, because as long as we allow this virus to be just running rampage any place on the world, there's going to be another variant. And we may not be as lucky this time to have something that seems to be milder, right? And it may not, the next variant our vaccines may not do anything about it. So yes, we have to protect ourselves with what we have now, but we need to make sure that we get the vaccine and the pills and everything. The last thing I want to say, if you do get COVID, within those first 5 days, as soon as you know it, especially if you have high blood pressure, diabetes, you're overweight, any of those things, asthma, anything, kidney disease, anything, if you have anything, you must ask your doctor, the health center, wherever you are, about monoclonal antibodies and or the pills from Merck or Pfizer. There are some pills that it's just 5 days. And if you take it early enough within the first 5 days, then you can cut down your chance of having to go to the hospital and be on
and let me ask you this, Ms. Jones, real quick. This is one of the questions I know that's on the list since you brought up the government. I mean, other than telling people to get vaccinated, which we know some people can't get vaccinated based on maybe health conditions or side effects they may feel they may get, their risk to the vaccine, or just maybe people don't want to get vaccinated. What are some other measures outside of telling people to get vaccinated that our state, local, and federal governments can implement to help stop the spread of COVID?
Mask mandates, mandates on ventilation in workplaces and in schools, and distancing mandates, getting tests and getting masks to people. But I have to say, as a physician, I started out 2 years ago, and I was like, we really, really need to hear people's questions, and we need to answer people's questions, and we need to be like, I am not going to go into any community saying you need to get the vaccine, right? Because 2 years ago, we didn't really know. I'm telling you now, even though I started all PC like that, right? I am telling you now, I am a doctor. You need to get the vaccine. There's very little health things. Like if you say, oh, well, I have diabetes, so maybe you need to get it, especially if you have diabetes. I have blood pressure. You need to get it, especially if you have high blood pressure. A lot of these conditions are things that make you more likely, if you get COVID, to be very sick with it and possibly die with it, or still have the long COVID. So I really can't think of many medical excuses for not getting the vaccine. Even if you had a reaction to something before in a vaccine, what they do is they watch you very carefully for, instead of 15 minutes after you get it, 30 minutes. If you were going to have a reaction, you would have it by then. So listen to me, people. I started out really, like, oh, we can't be going and forcing ourselves into communities, talk about you need to do this, you need to do that. Here I am right now, 2 years later saying, people, please, the urgency of our survival is at stake.
Right. All right. Now, did you have any more? Well, I know we got more questions.
Thank you for, stating that, because
Thank you.
I, was not sure, like why there would be a reason for someone not to take the vaccine or get the vaccine. But now you're saying that, if you have health issues, you really do need to get the vaccine. So that's important.
And if you are pregnant, you need to get the vaccine. A lot of people are like, well, I don't know, I'm pregnant. And how will it affect the baby? What we know is that if you get COVID while you're pregnant, you can have very bad outcomes. We have not seen any bad outcomes with the vaccine in pregnancy. In fact, because it protects you from COVID, you do much better. So even the pregnancy thing, and like, I'm too old now, I'm not thinking about pregnancy, but my daughter is. And I'm like, get the vaccine, right? Because these vaccines, like, we don't know perfect knowledge. We don't know 50 years from now what's going to happen. But we do know that COVID, even this so-called milder form of the Omicron, is making people sick, and it's still killing people. We're past what? I don't know. The last time I heard 830,000 Americans in this country had died. We must be at 850 now. I don't know, because it goes so fast. And there's so much, even though each person who gets Omicron might be at a less individual risk of dying, there's so many people getting Omicron that we're getting, the hospitals are going up. We're seeing some coming down in New York, maybe in Boston, maybe in the places that peaked early, maybe now it's going to go down, but that's not the last variant that's coming through here. And so that's the world orientation. Until we get shots and treatments and all, and masks and everything we need to everybody, it's just going to keep swirling around. And I haven't given up. We can't value the lives of all people all over this planet. Let's start by valuing our own, and then we need to push to value those of our brothers and sisters around the world.
Thank you so much, Dr. Jones. And, one last question, because we know that you have to go. What does our new normal look like? And will we ever not be masked? How can we make sure that we as Black families are following the best advice?
Somebody asked me 2 weeks ago, when did I think that we might have a chance at being at normal? And my answer then, and I don't have it like on the data. This is how I see it. Not until like Christmas of 2024. Did I say 2024? It's going to be a long time. We're going to get closer to normal if we vaccinate ourselves and wear the mask and stuff. But you see, there are going to be more variants coming along as long as the pandemic is raging anywhere on the planet. So when we get it under control, when we have disseminated so much vaccine and the other protective devices around the planet, is when we're going to know that maybe 6 months from then we can relax. That's why that's part of our job. I know that a lot of other people ask about herd immunity, and they're confused about when we are all vaccinated, we will have herd immunity. The number of people that you need vaccinated depends on how infectious the germ is, right? For the level of herd immunity, the people who have immunity for Omicron is a higher percent, maybe 90% of the population, right? To protect the babies, the ones who can't get the shot yet, as opposed to for Delta, maybe it would have been 80% or something. We don't know for the next iterations, the next variants that we're going to have. So, but the more people we can get vaccinated, that's how we're going to have permanent herd immunity. Even people who get an infection and they feel, well, I got it, now I'm protected. People who got Delta have gotten Omicron on top of it. What we know is that when you get the infection, the level of immunity that you get is not as high as if you get the shot. It's also not as long lasting as if you get the shot. So it'll give you some short protection, but not as high and not as long lasting. So yeah, so the best way for us to develop herd immunity is for us to get our vaccination, and then to encourage those around us to also get vaccinated, and those we love across the country, around the world.
Thank you so much, Dr. Jones.
Thank you.
Edward, I'll let you take it over.
Yeah. Thank you again, Dr. Jones. I know you got to run. We did have a couple more questions, but we'll get you next time. We'll get you next time.
Sounds good. Thank you so much.
Thank you,
Thanks for
Dr.
inviting me.
Jones.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Jones. Thank you.
Sure.
All right, everyone. Thank you so much for listening in with us. And next, we will have our president, President Penny Poole of the Gwinnett County NAACP, explain to us what, is the beloved community.
Good afternoon, family. It's such a pleasure to be here with you today. I want to thank Hope for, that prayer, and our friend, Dr. Kamara Phyllis Jones. She always comes when we ask, and we appreciate everything that she does. Today, we are here celebrating the MLK Jr. Sunday Supper. I hope all of you went and got your dinner. I did. Later on, I'll show it to you. It's always delicious. But just telling you where the Gwinnett NAACP is headed for 2022, we want to make sure that people understand that Dr. Martin Luther King was not just one-dimensional, that he was multi-dimensional. And the beloved community concept, Dr. King's beloved community concept, is a global vision in which all people can share in the wealth of the earth in the beloved community. Poverty, hunger, and homelessness will not be tolerated because international standards of decency and humanity will not allow it. And we always talk about all his other speeches, but we this year will be sharing about the beloved community, and we are seeking at the Gwinnett NAACP to reach that beloved community. So thank you for coming. We'll be talking more about it. We have many people that we want you to see today. This Sunday Supper, this is our third year doing it with the organization. My organization, Rev Up, initiated it along with the community partner, and but we have been loving this space, and we hope that it will help others in the community reach out, and help, and think of all of us as human beings. Thank y'all. We look for you staying and enjoying this. Also, the Gwinnett NAACP would like you to know that the first 5 people who sign up for membership at our NAACPGwinnett.org website, we will send the first 5 people membership packages as a compliment for joining on today between the hours of 4 and 6 during this program. So all of our friends and family who are out there, let's make this an opportunity to join. Thank you so much.
Thank you, President Poole. Thank you. And next, we're going to hear from our next 2 speakers, Desmond Patterson and Richard Cox III, and I will read their bios for you. Desmond Patterson is 11 years old. Desmond attends Moore Middle School in Lawrenceville, Georgia. He is a 2021 President's Award winner for academic excellence, a member of the Lawrenceville Youth Association, Black Knight football and basketball teams. He is also an aspiring pilot and a member of the Experimental Aircraft Association, EEA Chapter 690 of Gwinnett County Young Eagles program. He plans to attend Delaware State University and pursue a Bachelor's of Science in Aviation. His parents are Mr. and Mrs. Carlton and Katrina Patterson. John Richard Cox III is 15 years old, and he is a 10th grader at Gwinnett School of Math, Science, and Technology in Lawrenceville, Georgia. John attended the Mill Creek Cluster Schools in Gwinnett County Public Schools. John excels in sports, academia, martial arts, and is an honor student. His parents are Mr. and Mrs. John Cox and Miss Yvonne Cole. So I introduce to you Desmond Patterson and John Richard Cox III.
Here you go.
Thank you all for joining us. How y'all doing?
Doing good, sir. I'm good.
All right, good to hear. Good to hear. So we just got a few questions to ask you all. About what's going on in the community, at least among y'all age group and y'all fellow classmates and friends and everything. One of the first questions, and I guess I can throw this to you, Desmond. What's some things that you could do before 2020, before COVID, that you're not able to do right now?
One of the things I most definitely could do is probably like shake my friend's hand right in front of my teacher. Go hug my friend or something in front of a teacher. But now due to COVID, like teachers are trying to stop students from doing certain things and being intercourse with other students.
Okay. Thank you for that. And then for John, this question I'll throw to you. How has school changed as far as your outside activities? Whatever safe means to you, do you feel safe at home, at school, as far as extracurricular activities, at the grocery store? How's your everyday life changed under this COVID?
Before I answer, I would like to say thank you, President Poole, Vice President Paul, distinguished panelists, beloved community, for the opportunity to celebrate in this celebration and forum. And to answer your question, I feel safe. My parents and I are vaccinated. And before we leave the house, we use hand sanitizer or we wash our hands to keep ourselves safe and everyone around us safe. And yeah, so I feel pretty safe
Now, do you feel as far as in this? I know that was a pretty long, drawn out question. As far as your day-to-day life, how's, I guess, that adjustment in terms of things changing for you? How has that been? Just that transition.
The adjustment was hard. Remembering to bring my mask with me every day and use hand sanitizer every day, it was tough, but I have to keep myself safe and my family safe, so it has to be done.
All right. Thank you. All right. So Desmond, we'll go back to you. Speaking about school, what do you prefer? Do you prefer in-school learning or virtual learning or just some combination?
Probably a second option, maybe like some combination of it. Because I love virtual learning, but then sometimes I'll forget to get on a certain class at a certain time, or in person. I like it, but it's like a lot of things that happen at school that I don't like to be around. So like maybe a combination of it.
Okay. Now I'll let you ask the list. I don't want to take over to all the questions.
Oh no, our young men are doing such a great job. I'm just really impressed. So what would you say your biggest challenge has been, John Cox, in the current school year, with COVID and attending, in person and or virtually?
The biggest challenge was relearning how to socialize with my peers and relearning how to communicate with my teachers for any problem that I had. And it was hard because I was digital all last year and I lost some of my social abilities. So I had to regain those abilities in order to socialize again effectively.
All righty, thank you. And Desmond, Are students properly wearing masks at your school and washing their hands and socially distancing? What, like what process, does your school have in place to make sure that, students are protected, you feel?
I would say it's like a 90-10%. It's like 90% of the students don't wear their mask properly, and like most likely have them down and things like that. And like the other 10%, I would say keeps their mask up and like on tight. Some of the students will even wear 2 to 3 masks on their face at a time.
Oh, wow. Okay. Wow. Okay. That's interesting. You said 90%. That's a large number, Desmond. And how does that make you feel on a daily basis?
Sometimes it makes me feel not safe because it makes me think, what if one of the students are carrying it? And then I have friends at school telling me personally saying that they recently got COVID and they still have it and they're coming to school every day.
Oh,
And
wow.
it scares me personally.
Yeah, that is scary. hmm Edward, do you have additional
Yeah,
questions?
we got
Okay.
a few more. We got a few more left, and then if anybody that's watching, if y'all want to have any questions for our youth with Desmond and John, definitely drop it in the chat. Um, Teachers, John, do you find it it's been difficult for your teachers in terms of trying to teach through COVID, as far as doing online learning, in-person learning? Can you gauge, I guess, from observation and how the teachers been interacting with y'all? Has things been noticing a little more difficult for them adjusting?
Yeah, I've noticed that the teachers had to change the way they taught to conform to a digital way. And when they go back to in-person teaching, it's just not the same as it was before. It's not as polished, and it's difficult for the students to learn that way.
Thank you. Desmond, I go to you with these questions. Um, Tell us how you feel about school right now, currently, and in comparison to where it was before COVID.
Um, I sometimes feel 50-50, like it's good and it's not good. And sometimes I feel 60-40, like it's sometimes I will have a bad day and I won't feel good at all. And also due to COVID, restricting more and more of my abilities to do more and more things that I love to do in class, around my peers, and around my teachers.
hmm
All right. We got 2 questions left, so John, gonna let you answer the next to last, and then Desmond will come back to you. Um, if you had the power to change one thing, John, concerning this quarantine, wearing masks, the COVID rules, what would you change?
Really, I wouldn't change anything, but I would make sure that wearing a mask is enforced in schools because, like Desmond said, a lot of people don't wear masks, and that's not acceptable at all. So I would want to enforce that everyone wears a mask, including the teachers.
Okay, thank you. Um, Desmond, I'll throw the last question to you. What would you do to make it easier to live, work, and play um, with COVID-19?
Uh, Probably something really similar around to what John said. Enforcing mask, make sure enforcing people to wash their hands, sanitize them, and enforcing that people stay distance from each other to prevent viruses from spreading and sicknesses.
Wow, thank you. President Poole, did you have anything for them before we let them go?
Well, both of these young men are just outstanding. We have some time. If there are questions from our viewers, let's see if we could take some of those for our young men today. And you see, we are men top heavy. So this thing about where the men are, they're here working with, volunteering for, and for the Gwinnett NAACP. So if you want to find the Black men, young and old, they're working around the Gwinnett NAACP. Are there any questions for them?
None as of yet. I think Big John had a question. I'm waiting for him to drop it in the chat, or let me see. He hadn't dropped it yet. I will say I thank both of y'all for definitely, while we waiting on any question, for coming on and for your honesty and your answers. It does sound like we need to put a little pressure on the current school officials to enforce some of the policies, because it sounds like some of the policies around wearing masks and socially distance are not being enforced. It's a little bit too loose, and that's not good.
I do have a quick question while you were talking. Quarantining when someone is sick or maybe exhibiting signs of COVID, how is quarantining handled in your schools? How is that done? Either one of you, please.
I could answer. So I know that when someone gets sick, they have to talk to an administrator and they have to quarantine for a certain amount of time. Though I've never personally seen someone acknowledge that they were sick and go to the counselor while in school. So maybe it happens outside of school, or maybe it doesn't happen at all.
Thank you.
One of you mentioned that students come to school while they're sick. I mean, have you seen that happen before? And do you have any, knowledge of that happening at all?
Yes, ma'am. Most definitely. So when my friends tell me they're coming to school sick, I look at them in a different way, and I think to them your parents let you come to school sick every day, or you're allowed to be coming to school sick, also knowing that you might spread it to other people, jeopardizing around 1,200 students in the school.
I'd like to ask a question if I can. And I'd like to ask the question to both of the young gentlemen. One, how do you feel about the curriculum and the grading of the curriculum during this COVID session? Do you think it's fair to be held to the same standard as previous years in this COVID environment? And Desmond, you can go first.
I would say probably, yeah, yes, sir. Because even though there's some restrictions to learning, there's still you should still be able to most likely apply yourself in class, get the work done, and being sent home with homework, being able to get it completed and get it turned into a teacher.
And John?
Well, I feel as if the teacher isn't as efficient in teaching as they were before, I feel like students should be graded with that knowledge. Students should be graded based on that. They shouldn't have to be held up to the standard of a student that isn't experiencing what we're experiencing, a student that hasn't experienced COVID, that hasn't had to go through digital learning.
So I guess what I'm asking is, there are certain standards, college entrance and SAT scores, milestone situations, and those situations are based on an environment where teaching was different. Now, teaching is a little limited, maybe a little sterile because of having to be able to switch to a digital format. So let me ask the question and not make the assumption. Do you think you are learning as much as you were before March of 2020? Is the amount of learning the same, or are you feeling that you're getting the same level of education? And Desmond, you can go first.
About 99.9% of the time, yes. That 1%, I would say, is recently I was affected with COVID-19 and I had to quarantine up in the guest room, and it kind of did affect the way I've learned, because when I had to do digital assignments, there would be like some problems with them posting them up onto the board and me trying to click on links that wouldn't work. So it would affect my learning that 1% of the time, but the other 99%, I feel like it's not affecting.
Thank you. And John?
I feel that my learning, when I was doing digital learning, when I had a full digital year, it was sort of like how Desmond had it, only when he had COVID. It was hard to learn, and that foundation from last year, it's just hard to learn based off of last year going into this year. It's everyone is just adjusting, and for me personally, it's not easy. It's not the
We,
same as it was before.
we seem to have some questions or comments in the chat. Can we address those, please?
You're on mute now.
Oh, I am?
No, Na's on mute. I think she's trying
Oh.
to read the question.
Yeah, it looks like we have one question from April Hawk, from the Facebook Live group, and she says, when you clearly see someone not wearing masks properly or no kids are sick in school, is there a way to let teachers or officials know? And Desmond or John, either of you can answer this question.
I would say there is a way to let teachers know in school, and I will let a teacher know around me, and the teacher just have like a shocked emotion, but might not really do anything about it. And if I say like a specific teacher, I would say like my connections teachers, because they're dealing with kids every single day, going through lots and lots of classes with many of kids. And I would say I'm shocked about it. I'm not shocked about it as they are, and the fact that the kids are telling me like they're telling the principal that they're sick. Like the principals and teachers know that they're sick, but the principals are not doing anything.
Not good. All
I,
right.
I think Representative Mitchell may have put a comment or question in there. Can we see hers? Yeah.
Okay. Yes, Representative Mitchell said, has living through this ongoing pandemic changed what you want to do as a career? And John, I guess since Desmond had the last question, we'll let you, answer first.
Yes, it did change what I wanted to do, because originally I had wanted to major in robotics. I wanted to engineer robots. But when I took the robotics class, it was all online, so I didn't even get to even use a robot at all. And I guess that was a wasted experience, and I decided to go into game design instead, because I just didn't really like it, the robotics online, and I didn't know if I would like it in person, because I never had to experience it in person. I didn't want to waste a whole year if I didn't like it. So yeah.
And what about you, Desmond?
I would say not at all. As I want to do in my career, as if I want to go to Delaware State and be a pilot. It's not. It hasn't changed what I wanted to do in my career at all.
Okay, very good.
All right, and then we have one final question in the chat from Facebook. It was Orika. She said, "This is for John the Third. Share how and what he did to bring his social skills up to par to what it was used to before COVID." So I guess you said something about you had to do something with getting your social skills restructured, since we in a totally different times with COVID. So what were some of the things that you did, I guess, to adjust?
I talked to my family more, and I applied that in school. So I guess I would train at home with my family, and at school I would be able to use my social skills like I could use them before. And I would also start talking more in school to train at school as well.
Okay. Thank you. And I think it looks like that's it. That's all the questions from the chat. Thank you. Thank you both.
Ken, before you take us out, I'd like our community to know that the Gwinnett NAACP, along with our education chair, who is sitting in the room, John Cox, and our political action chair, as well as some of our other officers and community partners, we are researching, talking to community experts, and we are formulating a pandemic task force that we will be presenting to the Gwinnett County Public School Board. So we are working to get a map that can have strategy and put policies in place. The community has been asking for that. I know that our commissioner, school board member, Dr. Therese and Karen Watkins, as well as Everton Blair, they've been asking for this. So we want to make sure that, not for lack of trying, that there is a viable pandemic strategy policy in place to protect our teachers and our students, staff, and administrators.
To that end, can I ask the young gentleman 2 more questions before they leave? And these are quick questions. The first question would be, and it's for both of you, how many kids on average are in your classrooms?
I would say around 20 to at least 26, 20 to 26.
And John?
I would say 22 to 24.
And are you able to social distance, or are you practicing social distancing in those classrooms?
No, sir. It actually hasn't been brought up to any of the teachers or any of my peers at school at all.
And John?
The same thing. We aren't told to social distance, nor are we allowed to social distance. There's no space in the classroom to social distance.
Okay, and my final question, is there an enhancement to the filtration system in your classroom? Meaning, is there like a portable HEPA filter or something like that in the classroom where you're learning?
No, sir.
No.
Thank you.
Great questions.
Well done, gentlemen.
Yeah.
Well done. We are proud of our future.
Most definitely. Well, Desmond, John, we both thank you for coming on. Hopefully we'll see y'all active in our youth council that we're looking to reactivate by next month. And you can start advocate for some of these issues and things that you all experience in school in terms of policies that either not being enforced or not even being implemented. But we definitely thank you all for coming on, having this discussion. And we definitely pray over you all's lives, that God continue to protect you all and your families, look after you all, and continue to give y'all that good wisdom, because y'all got a lot of good wisdom for young men or young boys that's you all's age.
Yeah, kudos to their parents. We need to give the parents a hand. Great job, parents.
Excellent job. Yes.
All right. Thank you all again for coming on, and we'll get ready to introduce our final 2 guests.
Yes. I have the honor of introducing our 2 final guests. President Richard Rose, who is the president of the Atlanta NAACP, and Anthony Downer. I will read their bios for you. Richard Rose is the president of the Atlanta NAACP branch, one of the nation's oldest and most prestigious civil rights organizations. Mr. Rose is a graduate of Clark College, now Clark Atlanta University, where he was initiated into Kappa Alpha Psi Fraternity Incorporated. Mr. Rose is an Atlanta businessman and a longtime civil rights activist. He was elected as president of the the Atlanta NAACP branch in 2014. He has been involved with the NAACP and civil rights movement since his high school days in Memphis, Tennessee. He is a certified public accountant and a successful businessman. He has served in the Atlanta area since 1973. His diverse client list has included, the Housing Authority and HBCU, Black manufacturers, and other Black business professionals. In the 2020 election cycle, Mr. Rose led a coalition of Georgia NAACP branches in collaboration with the Divine Nine Black sororities and fraternities, the Prince Hall Masonic Order, Order of the Eastern Stars, and the Links, resulting in record voter turnout. He developed the website and mobile app ridetothepolls.com to match voters with drivers for transport to polling places during the GOTV campaign. Among his many accomplishments, Richard Rose has led the charge for the removal of the Confederate monuments and statues here in Georgia and abroad. Now, our next speaker is Anthony Downer II. Mr. Downer is an abolitionist educator, teacher leader, and mentor and community organizer who prioritizes Black-centric curriculum and instruction in secondary and tertiary education. Anthony Downer is an educational consultant, policy strategist, curriculum developer, and researcher of critical race studies. He currently teaches African Studies and Government Civics at Frederick Douglass High School on the west side of Atlanta. He serves as founding vice president of Georgia Educators for Equity and Justice. Anthony holds a Master's of Arts in Teaching Social Studies Education from Georgia State University and a Bachelor of Arts in Political Science from the University of Chicago. He was previously worked in civic engagement and community-centric organizations, government offices, and political and grassroots campaigns. Outside of teaching and organizing, Mr. Downer enjoys following shows, social media, and sports. He is Norcross born and Norcross raised. So I introduce to you some Richard Rose and Anthony Downer. Thank you both for joining us.
And before we start the questioning, Edward, we need to back up and talk about who our community is, who the beloved community is. And it's going to be very, very timely for this group that's coming up. Okay?
Okay, you can go ahead.
And who the beloved community is, because the NAACP will be speaking about the beloved community this year. And the people of the beloved community, they're the people who are directly affected by poverty, racism, and militarism. The triple evils of poverty, racism, and militarism are forms of violence that exist in vicious cycles. They are interrelated, all inclusive, and stand as barriers to our living in the beloved community. When we work to remedy one evil, we affect all evils. To work against the triple evils, you must develop a nonviolent frame of mind as described in the 6 principles of nonviolence, and use the Kingian model for social action outlined in the 6 steps. So again, this beloved community, we are teaching from the mindset of Martin Luther King Jr. And again, the people who are affected are those who are affected by that triple three evil. So as we get back, sit back, because I am excited to hear from Richard Rose, my mentor, and from Anthony Downer, a show enough strong, bad abolitionist. Y'all welcome them to this discussion. Gentlemen, thank you for coming.
Yes. I'm glad to be here, grateful. This is what I do every day, so it doesn't change. Let's go to work.
All right. Anthony, do you want to say anything before we get started with any questions?
Good evening, family. Good to be here, especially in celebration of Dr. King. Let's get started.
All right. President Rose, we'll start with you first. A couple of quick questions. I'll let you run. We'll run down. As far as the NAACP, why hasn't organizations like ours or any other, domestic organizations, taking some of the human rights issues we having with voting rights, with law enforcement, coming in our communities and, causing harm in our communities. Why haven't our organization, other organizations like ours, take our fight to the world stage? We've learned from the 60s. King didn't not only operate in the U.S., but he did attend Kwame Nkrumah's inauguration in Ghana. He was in conversation with world African leaders across the world. So was people like Malcolm X. He discussed a lot of the human rights issues that were happening among Black people or African people here in America. And, they took the fight to the global stage, especially now when we've seen, we have 50 Republicans currently that are against passing voting rights, along with a number of different Democrats that are against passing voting rights. Why haven't we started taking this fight globally? As we've seen, globally is a lot of times when the country has gotten international pressure that has moved the needle for us to get things done here domestically.
Well, King correctly identified our baseline problem. And the problem is white supremacy. Let me just say that again. White supremacy is our problem. Because it manifests in all of the systems under which we operate, not only in America, but across the globe. As Bishop Tutu said, white men came to South Africa and Blacks had the land and they had the Bible. And now Blacks have the Bible and they have the land.
Yes.
So I think our forebearers have correctly identified what the fight should be, and it's just up to us to understand that it's multifaceted. That all of these organizations can have different roles as long as they are in the same fight. If we define the fight, we define white supremacy as the ultimate evil, evil against humanity, evil against people of color. And there are so many, as I said, all these systems that do different things. The unequal system of justice, the education system that you alluded to earlier, that continues to it continues to deny people of color the education they deserve to have. Even though we pay the taxes, we should get the education we deserve to have. And not what the education that some people think they can afford to give our children. So it's multifaceted. What I have tried to do is to bring all of these different organizations together with the real understanding of what we face in America and across the globe. One of my pet projects has been attacking Confederate monuments, because I recognize, after having started my first protest as a 13-year-old, we looked at all of the laws that have been passed, Supreme Court and otherwise, yet there's an undercurrent of white supremacy that thrives in America, that thrives in the country, in America, in the world. And that thriving, I think, I'm convinced is due in part that government promotes white supremacy in its policy, in its symbolism. It continues that. And unless we start by getting government out of the white supremacy business, then we're not making much progress. Government tells us a lot of things, and most people listen to it. Like all of us know the pledge allegiance to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America. So, and what is that about? Why we pledge allegiance to the flag? We ought to be pledging allegiance to the Constitution that says we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men and women are created equal. So we follow this country. We follow the policies of government, and we know absolutely, without a doubt, that these policies were created in a world of African enslavement, And unless we change the whole system, as we recognize that all of these things must change, we are condemned to continue to live just where we were born. And I, for one, am just not going to be satisfied with that.
Thank you. Thank you. Another question I had was, what more can we do to get our people to mobilize, not only to join organizations like the NAACP or other organizations like Black Lives Matter or Black Voters Matter or Urban League or any other local organizations, but to get involved? Because organizations like I had a massive group of people that joined, when George Floyd was murdered a couple years ago, and Breonna Taylor and Ahmaud Albrado's murders happened kind of back to back to back to back. So what can we do to get our people to stop being so reactionary? To no, you need to be involved now. Don't wait till the next hashtag happen with whoever gets murdered. Get involved now. Let's be proactive and not so much reactive to these things.
Well, education is educating people as to where we are and understanding, and better explain it. There are four levels of the reaction to oppression. The first is resistance. When the ships, Portuguese ships, went to Africa and started capturing Black men and women, therefore their only thought was, how do I get out of here? How do I get off the ship? How to get rid of these chains? What I do is resistance. The second one is acknowledgement. So, okay, I'm in the ship now. I've made it to this foreign land that I don't know anything about. How do I get out? And I'm going to continue to resist until I can get out. That's the acknowledgement stage. But the third stage is where most Black people have come to be, and that is acceptance. These are the white supremacy rules under which we must live, so I'm going to accept them and do what I need to do. And of course, the fourth is the most dangerous, which is complicity, where members of the oppressed class conspire with the oppressors to the detriment of the other members of the oppressed class. We find that in so many places. And of course, one of the things I do as president of Atlanta NAACP is I begin to call out those members of the oppressed class, those other Black Americans who participate in this oppression. I tell people, talking about Stone Mountain, and it's hard for many people to understand. A Black preacher from Atlanta, from an HBCU, gave the invocation at the dedication of Stone Mountain. He prayed over the celebration of white supremacy that's embodied in the carvings at Stone Mountain. So we have a long way to go, but we've been dominated and oppressed for 400 years in America. And so it's not going to be easy. But until God takes my last breath away, I will still continue to be in this fight.
All right. Now, did you want to jump in with some questions for either him or Anthony?
Yeah, I will ask a question of Anthony Downer. Mr. Downer, politically, what does the African diaspora in America need to do to form concerted group along with like-minded allies built on political party, but rather ideology, since we have perpetually been pimped by both major parties that has led to slaughter, instability, and chaos, and we have been seeking the leftover crumbs from the American pie?
Ooh, that's a big one. That's a heavy one. Well, first, I think, and I want to thank President Rose for not only being here, but acting in the spirit of Dr. King, who was a courageous, radical grassroots organizer. One of the first things is that we need to separate ourselves from that party affiliation by calling out our own folks, like President Rose did of Kasim Reed. That wasn't a rare repudiation. That was a courageous repudiation. And you had many of us cheering you on, because that's exactly the kind of split from the party we need. This fight over voting rights, this fight over criminal justice reform, this fight over climate justice, and a lot of other priorities that affect Black people. Um, we're loyal to these parties, especially Black women. Black women vote at the highest levels, aligned with the party of any other subgroup. And yet, how much of the agenda of Black women has been adopted or realized by either party? That shows us that party affiliation is not going to get us to liberation. That shows us that, quite frankly, at the end of the day, in order to resist and truly subvert white supremacy, we need our own spaces. We need our own efforts. We need our own agenda. And spaces like this with the NAACP chapters and the work that we're doing in our communities for our students, for our parents, for our communities, that's what's going to make the change, not relying on parties. We sent the first Black woman vice president to the White House. And again, how much of our agenda has been realized at such a high level in the government. We can no longer rely on them. We have to serve ourselves.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And if it's okay, I would like to ask Mr. Rose a question as well. Dr. Rose, educationally, what do we need that will form a concerted group of the African American diaspora built on learning world history of the original man rather than misinformation that we have perpetually been fed by the dominating culture? How do we lead Black people to other options rather than following an Eurocentric educational system that has omitted the culture and ethnicity of the African diaspora civilizations in non-white countries?
So again, we got to go to work. That's not going to be easy. That is because all of the basic beliefs that we have historically have been skewed. In America, let's just start with Columbus. Columbus didn't discover America. You discover somewhere 2 million people already live. He invaded America. And so we have to read more and understand that much of American history has been poisoned by the daughters of the Confederacy, who in the 19th and early 20th century actually, helped to develop the textbooks that our kids read in K through 12. So we have to get away from that. We're working on a project called Codex Black with an ad agency, 22 Squared, who helped us develop Invisible Hate. We're going to our aim is to put real history in one place with videos and books and so forth on the internet, free, so that not only do the Black people and brown people understand the real American history, and white people understand too how they've been a part of the deception and the subordination of the rights of people of color. And so it is hard, but we have to read. Reading is fundamental.
Amen. Thank you so much, Mr. Rose. Thank you. Now, if it's okay, Edward, I do have a question for Mr. Downer. Mr. Downer, how has silence to injustice and inhumane treatment of African Americans perpetuated the cycle of no accountability in our country and misinformation in our community?
First, I want to, if I may, go back to that previous question on the education. I'm thankful to teach at a Black school, and I teach Africana studies as well as civics. And for our students, we have to understand, for a lot of us, we think them going to a Black-centric school or they have Black teachers and Black peers, that's going to solve the issue on the curriculum or discipline. And I'm here to tell you that's not. Really, a lot of our schools that are in Black districts are under even more stringent and tightly held accountability systems around adhering to these white supremacist standards. When we look at what the state legislature is doing, it just resumed session last week. The Republicans introduced House Bill 888, which is their version of the anti-CRT or the classroom censorship legislation. A few things that it does is it bans the teaching of critical race theory, which is not happening in our public schools. But it also is expanding the definition of critical race theory to really include anything around equity, justice, liberation, or inclusion for our students of color, and primarily for our Black students. That legislation, as an accountability measure, also threatens to defund any school district by 20% that's found out of compliance with not teaching CRT, race, racism, culture, etc. And that's going to put a target on the back of course, all districts, but primarily Black districts, Black educators, Black students. Those folks are at risk. My course, Africana Studies, could be at risk, but I'm thankful for those educators that have come before me that have threatened and shown us the model for what we call fugitive pedagogy, resistance pedagogy, to teach in the face of these risks without any hesitation, and to really do our best, regardless of what system we're serving under, to serve our Black students and make sure they are taught the authentic and critical version of history. And so that's in the realm, and that's in the tradition of Dr. King. We are subverting, we are anti-oppression, we're disrupting and agitating within the system, as we're pushing for full-throated educational liberation. And so I just wanted to talk about the curriculum piece and what's coming down the pipeline that's really going to be a barrier to Black education. And I'm sorry, could you repeat the second question? I do want to make sure I hit that.
Okay, the second question was, how has silence to injustice and inhumane treatment of African Americans perpetuated the cycle of no accountability in our country and misinformation in our community?
Yeah, this is huge, because and I'm coming at it. I'm a civics teacher, and President Rose, maybe you have these numbers more accurately than me, but not even 30% of the citizens of Atlanta voted in the last mayoral election. Is that correct?
That is
not
correct.
Even 30,
Wow.
not touching it.
Right.
And you all know that of course we should be proud of Black leadership, and but what we should not be proud of is the continuation of neoliberal policies that are anti-Black, and because we put a Black face on those things, we think that we've achieved some level of advancement or progress, and that's a slap in the face to leaders like Dr. King and the Civil Rights Movement, especially in his hometown. To have a city run by Black neoliberal, anti-Black, corporatist, capitalist, no do-gooders, and I'm trying to watch my language this Sunday, but these folks are the reason why so many of us are silent. They're the reason why we have this silent majority of Black folks who are suffering. And when you peel back the layers of this Black Mecca of Atlanta or Metro Atlanta, you find that the city of Atlanta, the Black Mecca, the home of Black Hollywood and so many Black millionaires and HBCUs, is bleeding Black people. Atlanta, the city of Atlanta, is only 51% Black now because it is no longer affordable or profitable to be Black and to be in the city of Atlanta. Studies have come out that now more Black people across the country live in the suburbs rather than cities, as gentrification, as a crackdown on crime, as a lack of investment and opportunities prevent our communities from thriving in these urban centers. And so as Tyler Perry moves here, as the city of Atlanta moves forward, we have schools like Frederick Douglass High School on the west side of Atlanta that is bleeding teachers out the classroom, that has no space, as our students told you earlier, no space to social distance, do not have the quality education that they need, the policies that really support their growth mentally, physically, and otherwise. And so this silence that's happening, and we're not even talking about the white community, I'm talking about the Black community. It starts right here. This silence is deep and it's heavy, and the voices that are speaking about us and to our issues are not telling the truth. If you watch this, last thing I'll say, if you watch the recent interview by Vice President Kamala Harris, if you saw what she said about our lack of testing, just Google it, about the failure of this administration to truly serve Black and brown communities, low income communities during a pandemic. If you hear constantly every day how defensive this administration is during their press conferences, you wouldn't even think that they won with the Black vote because of how much they disrespect us on a daily basis. I'm here to ask, how much longer are we going to be silent? Or when are we ready to really get revolutionary in the tradition of Dr. King?
Thank you so much, Mr. Downer. And we did have one response. Thanking you, for your authentic. It says, Mr. Downer, thank you for giving light to these issues that usually is not brought up. So thank you both, Mr. Downer and Mr. Rose. Mr. Paul, please, I will let you take over with additional questions.
All right, let me see what we have. A few more. Well, Anthony, I asked Anthony this because I didn't get a chance to ask him any questions. Of course, because of the bureaucracy with the school system, there are always going to be limitations on what can be taught in the classroom. So how important it is we create spaces like this one to educate our children on our ancestors, educate them on Africa, educate them on Dr. King, that goes beyond him being on those steps talking about, I have a dream. Because as you know, the way this social structure that we're trapped in currently as Black people in this country, they're going to sanitize Dr. King, just like they sanitized Rosa Parks on the bus, just like they sanitized John Lewis on the bridge. How important is it that we go beyond the school system? We still organized to get it to where it needs to be to make sure our kids are getting a quality education. But how important it is for us to create spaces like these to educate them and skill them up to have a broader way of viewing the world, and to help them understand that they don't have to, put up with the world that we currently live in. They can fight to create a better one.
This is a great question. When I look at the public school system, we have thoroughly Black, very, very Black school systems with majority Black leadership, with Black superintendents and principals and all of that making policies. And yet we have not been able to achieve the liberatory and abolitionist education that our students deserve. Mm-hmm. And to that end, I'm a separatist. I believe that Black people need to exit the public school system, and we need to educate our own. So I think part of that is looking at what policies, what investment our community can have, and curriculum is one of the largest we can have. I have a tutoring business that's up and running called Liberation Learning Lab. And it will one day turn into a Black-centric school that serves parts of Gwinnett and other parts of Metro Atlanta. And at the root of that will be this fully Black-centric curriculum and instruction to learn our history and our culture, but not just in history courses, in every single course. It will have a pedagogical and instructional framework that teaches students, because students is not just what they're learning, but it's how they learn. And we don't have enough teachers that are culturally responsive to understand how to translate these standards into content that can be relevant and understood by our scholars. So what our parents need to understand is that it does start at home. I got my fire. I was radicalized by my mom, who graduated from Spelman, raised in East Oakland, and so gave to us this background that was fuller than what the schools could ever give us. So by the time that I learned about slavery, I had already learned it from a Black-centric perspective. There was nothing the school district could tell me that could hinder me or to harm my education, because my mom had already caught that. So we do need community efforts. We need family efforts to pass down our generations of knowledge. For instance, I'll tell you, our ancestors were oral storytellers. I can tell you there's not much in the school that is aligned to that tradition of education. a standardized test is not going to measure, right, a Black-centric sense of learning. And so we absolutely need community efforts and resources around these things. But folks, while we are waiting to build those centers, those cultural centers for our education, we do need to fight to make sure our public system is serving us, because at the end of the day, our dollars are going into it.
Yeah.
Our scholars are enrolled there today. They need to be served right now. And so as a call to action, I will call on every single parent and other rights holder in the education system to call or email their state representative in opposition, vote no on House Bill 888 as one measure to squash the attempts to destroy Black education.
Let me just jump in. I got some agreement and some differences with this fine young man. He's got, his sensitivity is off the chart. But let me say this: the system that under which we live is not easy. It's difficult. We have to attack it top down as well as bottom up, because if you don't do both of them, we will not achieve a change in the status quo. I grew up, I was educated in a separate system per se. It was segregated in Memphis, Tennessee. All of my teachers went to HBCUs. We didn't sing America the Beautiful. We sang Lift Every Voice and Sing when we had assembly. And so, but we had to learn extra. We had to learn what white students were learning, but we had to learn Black too. And so I have always took the position that I had to fight the status quo, but also go around it at the same time. So while they talk about critical race theory, I submit that we should have our program of critical truths about race. I decided I was going to do civil rights stuff at the age of 9. I was in class, segregated class, right in Memphis, Tennessee, not far from downtown. And we had a little periodical called The Weekly Reader. And this week, it was on zoos. And they talked about the New York Zoo and the LA Zoo. It might have been the San Diego Zoo. My mother was a teacher. And so 4th, 5th, and 6th grades, I went to school with her, and I went back to the neighborhood school. So on the way home, I said, Mother, can we go to the zoo this weekend? Because I was intrigued by what I had read. And she said, no, we'll have to go to the zoo in the summertime, because Negroes can only go to the zoo on Thursday. And I had to have some understanding. Why? Who owns the zoo? What does it cost? Can we afford to go to the zoo? Whatever it is. And that was, and she patiently explained it. My mother is from a little town called Itta Bena, Mississippi, which is in the same county where Emmett Till was lynched. And so I came from a perspective that was probably much, much different than my peers. And so I've never stopped. I decided right then, the first opportunity I got a chance to fight against these laws of discrimination, these policies of discrimination, I would, and I did. And in any ways, I've just never stopped. It's cheaper and quicker for us to create an alternative narrative than to and an alternative resources than to start our own school system that we paying for anyway. It's much cheaper for us to embrace some of the plans that we have, like for Codex Black, than to pull out of the Atlanta school or pull out of the Gwinnett school, but introduce these alternative resources for education within the existing framework. Understanding that all of K through 12 education has changed since I was in school. They got this different kind of rubric. They got, we took standardized tests too, but we took them for a different reason. We took standardized tests at the beginning of the year so that the teacher, because we were mobile too, so that the teacher could say, who is Richard Rose and who is Penny Poole? Where they, and what I need to do to get them up to the level of the second or third or fourth or fifth grade. And then at the end of the school year, they test the same students. So let's see what the progress has been. There's nothing wrong with standardized tests. We just use it wrong. We use it to punish teachers and punish Black administrators instead of educating students. If you were to be admitted into a nursing home tomorrow, they would assess you on what how you can manage your daily functions. And it doesn't matter, they don't do it by age, they don't do it by race, they don't do it by height or weight. They do it by what each individual is able to do. I think our students should be treated the same way every year in every class at every school. Let's see what this student can do. How do we get this student to where we think he or she ought to be? And again, while from the top down, we examine what it is that we think, is it rational? Is it appropriate that the standards that we set should be applied? Again, it's got to be bottom up and top down. Unless and until we make the status quo uncomfortable, it will not change. We have to make it change, and we have to change the narrative. We cannot accept their narrative anymore. We shouldn't have accepted it anyway, but that was part of the acceptance of white supremacy beyond acknowledgement. We have to have our own narrative and reject the narrative. Reject that no Black kid in America, no Black or brown kid in America, and the white folks have to catch up, should say Columbus discovered America anymore. Cut it out.
Stop lying.
Right, just stop the lie. And some of these other things. But it's gonna be, we have to, it's a tough job. It's a tough job. My favorite song is Lift Every Voice and Sing. And it's an anthem, it's a protest song, it's a song of gratitude, but it's also instruction. Let us march on until victory is won. We still there. Let us march on. We made some progress, but we are not there. And a few of us, got good jobs, make $200,000-$300,000, but you're still oppressed. If you make $1 million and you're Black, your kid, your son or daughter can still be racially profiled and pulled over for driving while Black. We have to make sure we get these messages out, or we are doomed to repeat.
Yeah. And I'm gonna pull up. We got some comments from the chat. It says Black history must include pre-slavery knowledge. Many Black History Month school curriculums only address slavery and segregation. That's from Sicily. I definitely agree with that. I would add it, if you're gonna teach enslavement in the United States, you also need to teach resistance, because a lot of time what our kids learned is that we was enslaved, but they don't talk about how we resisted slavery. And it was the fact that we was burning down plantations and burning up crops, that pressure that was happening both in America and in the diaspora is what set off the Civil War, and eventually helped win the Civil War for the North, at least, and broke enslavement. The fact that we did resist it. My mom talked about all the time. My grandmother walking around with a gun in her purse even in her old age, God rest her soul. And I had to explain to my mom, I'm like, well, we lived, I'm from Mississippi too. That's where my roots are too. You mentioned Mississippi, that's why I bring this up. I tell my mom, like, she was in Mississippi, it could jump off at any point in time. Somebody could try to snatch you up. So she had to be ready. And so that mentality just stayed with her even after, that particular period of time, and Jim Crow had passed. But our kids don't understand that we just wasn't getting lynched and not fighting back, that we was armed. I think there's a movie out right now, I think called The Women's Movement, that talks about Emmett Till. When they took Mamie to Mount Bayou, Mississippi, the reason they took her there because there was an all-black town. It was one of the largest cities at that time in the state of Mississippi, largest black cities, only black hospital in the state, but they had protection. It was black people there that were armed, where the Ku Klux Klan wasn't just going to come in there and take Mamie Till up out of there. So if you're going to talk about our history from an enslavement, you need to talk about what cultures we brought over here from Africa, what spirituality we brought here from Africa, our knowledge about how to grow rice, things like that. My mom tell me all the time, white people didn't understand how to grow those different things as far as rice and beans. That black people, our ancestors, had to teach them how to do this. So that came from the boats. So again, if you're going to talk about enslavement, that all needs to be clear. It needs to be taught from a humanized perspective, and it needs to be taught from we resisted. Here's the things we did to help break the back of slavery, that forced the hand of our government to eventually let us go, because the cost, as President Rose just pointed out, outweighed keeping the institution of slavery going.
Okay, thank you so much, Edward. Do we have any questions for these two mighty men from our viewers?
I don't see a question right now, but I do see a comment, from John Cox. And it says, in my home, we infuse the contributions of Black folks into the public school educational curriculum. However, this should be done in the schools so that all children learn the truth and we can free ourselves as a nation from the idea of superior or inferiority. And I would like to say, too, that, the schools don't teach the truth about slavery. They don't teach the whole truth about Black history. So we need for it to be true and authentic.
So to extend what you're saying, this is what we understand. White folks are not telling the truth, period. Mm-hmm. So they're not telling the truth in the class. They don't tell the truth about enslavement. As you mentioned, you can look at the rebound, look at the laws that were passed, and it tells you about the resistance that these laws, the citizens arrest, for example, the slave catchers, our current policing tactics and forces have evolved from slave catching patrols, where they deputize white folk and to go and bring back these slaves, because they were not satisfied with slavery. We cannot. It is the duty of the oppressed to resist, not an option, but it's the duty of the oppressed to resist.
And I want to jump in. I absolutely want to shout out the students that we had earlier on the panel. I want to shout out my fellow educators, because I think we do focus, of course, on what's not happening, but some of this is happening. It's happening at high levels. Shout out to my new home of Atlanta Public Schools. And so there's some hope, because despite this pandemic, despite a lack of resources, if you watch Abbott Elementary, you are getting an inside look into how a public or an inner city school works. But despite a lot of these barriers, a lot of this education is happening. We're gearing up for a really big globalized and intersectional Black History Month celebration on the West Side. And what we need to, what we're talking about is this happening more so. And how we get to an expansion of things like this happening is putting the experts at the front line of policymaking in the educational system. When we're talking about the pandemic and we're deciding what to do medically and with safe and health, we turn to our doctors, we turn to folks like Dr. Fauci, who have been studying these things. So when we talk about fixing education, we need to listen at the forefront to those educators, those students who are in our schools every single day. They need to be not the bottom of ladder, the last rung, or the last step on the train stop. They need to be at the very, very front, at the seat of the table, making decisions. When we talk about these policies being made, whether it be against anti-CRT or whether it be at the top of an educational system, these policies are being made by folks who have not been in our schools, who have not taught, and it's a disaster when we look at the outcome. But imagine if we had policies made by actual educators, by classroom teachers who know the implications and the everyday experiences. Imagine if we lifted up the voices of students and we listened to students in places like Chicago and Boston. Then they wouldn't have to walk out of their schools, wouldn't have to protest. They could be a part of our decision-making from the get-go. So I'm really proud of the work that's happening out there. Everything that we hear from our parents and our community members, we try to adopt and we try to prioritize. Even with as limited resources as we have, we're making it happen in our schools every single day.
And to just put a pin on, exclamation point on what he just said, Fulton County School Board is 4 whites and 3 blacks. No, 2 blacks. 3 of the white members have absolutely no college. These are just high school grads, and they're making major decisions about our money as well as our students. I mean, it's such an incredible insult to those students. You know, we Atlanta just fought a battle with the Fulton County schools. There was a East Plus a few years ago to rebuild elementary school in East Point called Conley Hills, where the new superintendent comes in to decide that he wants to combine that school with a middle school. And so you got K through 8. And so, you know, we had to go to the mat and pack out the board meetings in order to get the board to overrule the superintendent. As somebody else said, we have to be involved. I would love to, Brother Down, I would love to get with you, man, because if you at Douglas High School, you're in my neighborhood. I live in Collier Heights. I mean, we need these young people with these great ideas. My mother was a 38-year elementary school teacher. She taught 2nd and 3rd grade, sometime in the same room at the same time. So I know where you're coming from. I'm from that environment, and I think it has helped me to understand the totality of what we have to deal with in this fight against white supremacy.
President Rose, I did have one last question for you from my end.
Sure.
So staying on what you're talking about somewhat, what can we do to mobilize the mass of people here in Georgia to get up to come out for this midterm election? As you just stated, you know, we need to make sure we got the right people on these school boards. We're electing the right people in county commissioners, the state legislator. Again, as you know well as I know, the state legislator, whether it's in Alabama, Georgia, or Mississippi, that has always been used as a white nationalist or white supremacist weapon to beat back any gains we made federally, whether it was Reconstruction and they took over the state legislators and passed all these laws to enslave our people into a lot of these state prisons, whether that's in the civil rights era where they passed in all these bills from the 60s to kind of create voter suppression, or even like I said, in 2022, where we've seen all these massive bills that have come through, SB 202 being one of them. I think Anthony brought up an education bill that they're trying to push through now to stop teacher survey. So what can we do to get people to understand that this election is a for at least for us here in Georgia, it's going to be a once in a lifetime election that could change the course of what the future looks like for our children and our children's children, because these people have dropped all pretenses and they're willing to basically go all out to lock in a minority rule, the minority white rule, not only in the state but across the country. But I'm specifically speaking about Georgia, since all our state legislative seats in both the Georgia House and Georgia Senate, along with the governor's mansion, are up this year.
So we have to, those of us who understand what this battle must be, must speak up, and we must speak out. Let me just remind you, In 2015, when I attacked Stone Mountain from the Atlanta branch with the cooperation of the CAB and SCLC, there was no discussion about removing these monuments. And since that time, we've moved several of them. People now understand how significant and detrimental the message of these monuments are. If you drive down the street, you see a building with a cross on top of it, you assume it has something to do with Christianity. It's a church of some kind. So when you see these monuments, they are advertising white supremacy. White supremacy. The three men who were convicted of killing Ahmaud Arbery were taught that they should kill a black man one day because a black person to them has no rights. They are required to submit to any command that they give. That is what we face. That's what we have to continue to speak out about, because again, there's many blacks in our community who have accepted white supremacy without even realizing. And so we have to continue to do this work. Unfortunately, that's the way it is. You know, it's a tough mantle to bear. But King did it. You know, let's be in the mold of King and C.T. Vivian, James Bevel, Hosea Williams, the latter of which I worked with a long time, the bravest man I ever met in my life. So we just have to get busy. It's not easy. It's the right thing to do. And if I don't see some of the things I'm fighting for, it'll be better for the next generations.
Can I add to this conversation?
Because our time is running out, and we don't want to belay our audience. We're getting near the close of our program. Is it a quick question, Brother John?
It's not a question. It's a statement I wanted to make as education chair, since we're talking about education.
Okay, come on, because we want to make sure that we are cognizant of people's time. Thank you. Go ahead, please.
So what I'd like to say is that in doing this work as education chair, you know, I found that a lot of resources don't exist. Some because there hasn't been a large enough voice for these resources. So, you know, I contact the Gwinnett Public School System and ask about, you know, African American Studies program just for my son. And I asked, hey, is there an AP program that he could take on African American history? Because I'd like him to have that before he graduates from the K through 12 system. And it doesn't exist. So they say, well, you know, we've looked, and we'll be happy to take a look into that program if we could find an accredited one. So, you know, I go and I look and I find plenty of accredited African American history programs and an AP program that exists. That AP program was under maintenance at the time. But what I want to say is that if you are concerned about having African American history taught in the school system, then make that call. Call the social studies director for Gwinnett NAACP. For the GCPS system, or call that person in your school system that is over that department and has to do with that curriculum, and ask them about it and why isn't it there, and get it put on, talked about and brought up and ask for it to be implemented. Because even though at home, at my house, we augment my son and with everything he needed to make sure that he didn't feel left out at any stage of his education. So whether we were talking about the country becoming a country, we talked about Crispus Attucks, Prince Whipple, and Prince Hall. When it came to Benjamin Franklin, we talked about Benjamin Banneker. When it came to Lewis Latimer, we talked about came to Thomas Edison and Alexander Graham Bell. We talked about Lewis Latimer, who did patents for both of them. But at every stage of American history, or at every stage of American advancement, Black people have been there. We've been here since 1619. So before this country was a country, we were here, and we played a part in every stage. So there was enough history for us to have a thorough African American history course, and at the elementary level, at the middle school level, and also at the high school level. We talked about them teaching slavery. Well, you can't teach slavery without teaching the origin of the word, and that the expansion of the Ottoman Empire is where the term comes from, where the Ottoman Empire subjugated Slavic, and that's where the term comes from. So it seems disingenuous if you're teaching a set of curriculum that harms one and edifies another. When if we taught slavery from the perspective that all people were slaves, then no one would be injured by it, and it would just be thought about that this was something that is not a good practice for anyone. Also, I believe in last thing. I believe in education being a tool to write positively on what we see children sometimes as blank slate. And if we don't fill those spaces with positive reflections of themselves, then they can be vulnerable to the propaganda, to media, and so forth and so on. I heard one of the panelists say that, my parent taught me well before I engaged it at school, and that was necessary. So then he was now protected from, something that might have been used to make him feel bad about himself. So it's important that we do that. When we create education programs, it's also important that we use a view that edifies and not just, edifies all and not just, some.
Great. Thank you so much for that. Basically, you're saying if we don't speak up and use our voices for ourselves, our family, who will? Thank you, John.
Yes, we're 30% of Gwinnett's public school system, and we should be voicing ourselves and making sure that we get what we need.
Yes,
from the system.
Those are some good numbers. You did say, he was saying that we are 36% Latinx, 36% African American, 11 to 12% Asian, and 18% white people. So all of you speak up, come up to those meetings. You said wonderful things, John. Okay, Edward, you ready to take us out? And before you take us out, gentlemen, it has been real. It has been so real, refreshing, just a breeze coming through Gwinnett County, virtually by way of the internet. Thank you.
All right. I can go ahead and give us a close us out, but before I do,
so the program, would you like to go through? I think the last thing is about the community on the agenda. It's that how do we achieve the beloved community? I think that's the last thing on the program, and then you're welcome. Okay, so I will open, and then you can close us out. Okay, thank you. Okay, so the last thing, we've been talking about this beloved community all this time. And lastly, how do we achieve the beloved community as seen through the eyes of MLK, his predecessors? So the people of the African diaspora have always been spiritual people, God-fearing people, loving and moral people. We must forgive each other and love each other. Accountability and then reconciliation must be achieved before we go forward. Also, we thank God for our committed allies. Again, we thank God for committed allies. However, we cannot accept leadership that looks like us that are not for us. Money over matter is no longer acceptable. If the dollar comes from your oppressor and are tainted because they are connected to strings, eventually you will hang. We cannot get titles and a title only. Those who are afraid to lead and say the things that are hard to say, get out the way. We are not members of a party who allow us to suffer and never achieve this beloved community. We must have an ideology that does not erase us, but rather celebrate us and humanize us as we achieve equity that the dominant culture has taken advantage of. Violence, poverty, institutionalized and privileged racism must be gone. The conversation must openly take place. Those who are complicit and turn a blind eye will be held accountable from an authority greater than man. The Gwinnett NAACP vigorously is seeking the beloved community. Family, come and help us. We are a volunteer organization. Contact us. And as John was just saying, let your voice show up and let your voice be heard. Join us. Now to you, Edward. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Again, we want to thank everybody for joining us tonight on the program. Thank all our guests, Dr. Jones, Anthony Downer, President Rose, Desmond, John Cox III. Again, we thank you all for coming on and bringing your different perspectives on all the different issues we discussed tonight, as well as thank everybody for joining us. If y'all don't mind, I would like to just read a quick paragraph from one of the books Dr. King wrote on the name of the book that he wrote is Where Do We Go From Here? As I always say, if you want to learn about somebody, you either read what they wrote or read what their spouse or somebody that was in their circle wrote about them. As far as that's concerned, it says, for its very survival's sake, America must re-examine the old presumptions and release itself from many things that for centuries have been held sacred. For the evils of racism, poverty, militarism to die, a new set of values must be born. Our economy must become more people-centered than property or profit-centered. Our government must depend more on its moral power than its military power. So let us, therefore, not think of our movement as one that seeks to integrate the Negro into all the existing values of American society. Let us be those creative dissenters who will call our beloved nation to a higher destiny, to a new plateau of compassion, to a more noble expression of humaneness. So pretty much what Dr. King is calling for us to do is to, reject some of the values that our President Poole just talked about: the racism, the militarism, the imperialism, the colonialism, the oppression of other non-white people. We have to reject those American values and set a higher standard for America, for ourselves, number one, and for our families and our communities, and then also for for the rest of the country. So again, like I said, and that's where do we go from here? Chaos of Community. That's from one of Dr. King's last books that he wrote. So again, I want to thank you all for coming out. We appreciate you all's time and coming with us today. Is there anything else that our guests or anybody else on the panel want to say before we bring it to a complete close?
Well, before we go to that, Edward, we want to make sure that we acknowledge our sponsor, Who's Got Soul. I'm not sure, were we able to get Katrina Patterson in the room?
No, I don't see her. I don't think we were.
Okay, so if we were not able to get her into the room, I just wanted to say a special thank you to Chef Cash, his staff, and particularly Miss Patterson for the hard work that she did in helping us get this event scheduled and processed today. We hope that many of you, despite the weather, was able to go and pick up your dinner. Again, those coupons were good for today. We have not heard anything else. If we get an update, we will definitely let you know. Again, we want to thank Who's Got Soul, who has locations in Atlanta, in Decatur, their most popular and oldest location on Harrington Road in Lawrenceville, and also this Black business, which opened up on last year during the pandemic in Duluth on Shackelford Road off of Pleasant Hill. Thank you very much, Who's Got Soul. Back in your hands, Edward.
All right, again, thank you all for coming. Well, President Poole, did you want to, at least, we always end every meeting or event with a prayer. Did you want to close us out with a prayer?
I would love to. As a matter of fact, I also wanted to acknowledge the United Ebony Society on tomorrow. They, as you know, the community gives a huge parade, which had to be canceled. And their president, Zach Pratt, has been instrumental in working and collaboratively helping make Gwinnett a positive place. And they have rescheduled a candlelight vigil at the historic courthouse in Lawrenceville from 5 to 7 p.m. on tomorrow. Again, the parade and its events have been canceled. However, on tomorrow, January 17th, on the steps of the historic courthouse in Lawrenceville, President Zach Pratt of the United Ebony Society is sponsoring that candlelight vigil honoring this King holiday. There will be other events coming up. I know we have a PAC event the end of the month. Please look for that. Go to our website, go to our Facebook and media pages. That's basically it. And we just want to make sure that you tune in, check in with your places of faith, stay connected to your community. I think that's it. If
President Poole, I'm sorry. Can I also give a shout out? This coming Thursday, the 20th, is the Gwinnett County Public School Board meeting. 2 p.m. is the work session. 7 p.m. is the business meeting. I'll go ahead and tell you all, be very aware of what's happening. They will be voting on leadership for the board, the chair and the vice chair. Many of us are supporting Dr. Therese in her bid for chair, and either Everton or Karen in the position of vice chair. Please watch your elected officials and how they vote on these policies, and then hold them accountable accordingly. I want to say something further, but it's Sunday, and I will behave, President Poole. Please watch Everton Blair and your other elected officials on how they vote on certain positions like this one right here. Thank you. Tune in on Thursday.
Thank you so much for that. And we also want to encourage you, as Education Chair John Cox was saying, you've got to get your voices heard. You have to let your opinion be known. The Board of Commissioners also meets the bi-monthly. There are also the Board of Elections meetings. Please, minimally go out and see what's happening in your community so that your voice can be heard, as well as there are 50 plus committees that are sponsored by our Board of Commissioners that are looking for volunteers. We need you. If that's it,
I'd like to add.
Yes, sir.
Please support your parent, teachers, and students associations. Right. Make sure you join up with those. And any requests that you have, you should start there and organize there. And that would immediately affect the schools that you're at.
Wonderful. And one last, Victoria Chirac, who is our new youth chair, she is having a meeting with the youth organization as we are revitalizing it. Please, if you need a place for your children to go and have a safe space and learn about us, join the NAACP pending youth organization that's beginning to start. Okay, I think we've done it. Richard, you sure there's nothing you need to tell us about in Atlanta?
Okay, no, we will be getting ready to, as you and I discussed, to try to again get this voter turnout in 2022. Somebody mentioned how important these races are. They cannot be overemphasized. We had a good start in 2020. By the time we got to the runoff, we were cooking on all cylinders. So we know what we have to do. We have to change this legislature because it doesn't like us. So we have to change the tenor of this legislature along with other races. Remember, we have to go top to bottom. One of our initiatives in Fulton County is to change the Fulton County Superior Court. We got a cokehead on the court. We got a lady they call the N-word killer. She starts with maximum sentence anytime she sees a black defendant. And everybody had, all of these things matter.
Yes.
All of these things.
Only said like Richard Rose would say it. I want to thank our illustrious panel. Edward, thank you for your hard work today. Nye Henry, oh God, thank you for stepping in. We had COVID issues, and she just filled these shoes just like we knew she could. Thank you, Simeon Harris, for all that you have done, and not, he's working this platform. Thank you for your hard work very much. And also, we must mention Adrienne Johnson, our secretary. She is ill, but she has put so much work into getting this done. We thank everyone for showing up, showing out on today. And now we would love to leave you with a word of prayer. Heavenly Father, first, forgive us of our sins. Forgive us for anything that we have done against you, Lord. Father God, you are God, and beside you, there is none else. Oh, we just lift our hands in exaltation. We thank you. We thank you for everything that you have done for us. We thank you for health and strength. We thank you for our bodies, our family. We thank you, God, for all that you have done. We ask to keep a hedge of protection around our families, our children. Lord God, give us safe spaces so that we can thrive and live, Lord God. Touch these people who go forward in you, in your might. Cover, Lord, cover. We just bless you. Lord God, give us the words to say. Give us a mind, Lord God, that is like you. Lord God, there is no one greater than you. Touch these movements, touch the people, God, because we can do nothing without you. The pandemic, God, we stand in your authority. We stand on your healing. We stand, God. Lord God, we thank you for what you have done, what you are about to do, blessing this committee, the people, all involved. We thank you. We thank you. We thank you. Lord, it's in the name of God that we lift up our hands. We thank you. Amen, amen, and amen.
Man. All
Thank
right,
you.
Thank you. Good night, everyone.